Hello everyone and welcome to the Resilience Sessions, a podcast that brings together injured veterans from Blesma, the limbless veterans charity, and a well-known public figure to share stories of overcoming challenges of all kinds.
The podcast provides an opportunity for our guests to chat with one another about their stories, sharing how they overcome their ups and downs so we can learn from them both. We hope you enjoy it.
And now to our guests. Judith Owen is a singer, composer and comedienne, perhaps best known for her hugely successful West End show with Ruby Wax, Losing It. A major advocate for mental health, many of Judith's albums document her own struggles with mental health, and she now lives between LA and New Orleans with her husband, Harry Shearer. And to our next guest, Stefan Van Niekerk is a veteran, motivational speaker and Making Generation R speaker who had a successful career in the military before stepping on an IED in Afghanistan, losing both of his legs and several fingers. Despite contracting both pneumonia and swine flu, Stefan made an extraordinarily fast recovery and now lives in Taunton with his wife and children. Hello, Judith.
Hello. Nice to meet you all.
Nice to meet you. And to Stefan Van Niekerk, I hope I've pronounced your name right, Stefan.
Thanks for having me. Really privileged to be here today. Thank you.
Great. So should we get started? Now, Judith, I'm going to come to you first of all. From the sound of it, you had a rather idyllic start to your childhood, hanging out at the Opera House in Covent Garden because of your father's work. Can you tell us a bit more about that, please?
Yeah, I had what I now realise is an unbelievably privileged upbringing in terms of, musically. It was extraordinary. My mum and dad were the only people that ever left Wales, left Llanelli, South Wales, to come to London to pursue his career as being an opera singer. And so from the age of 5, he was at Covent Garden for 35 years, sang there as a tenor. So from age of 5, I was there every single weekend, backstage, watching all the rehearsals, watching every ballet I could, every single thing, hanging out in the canteen with, a Domingo and a Pavarotti and everything. And it just seemed normal, of course, to me, because that was what my dad did. And so I didn't have any sense that there was a different life. And I didn't get that really until I started to, I'm really not grown up. I was going to say until I grew up, but I'm a musician, therefore I've never grown up. So, but I now realize that so much. But in truth, it was a beacon, a light in an otherwise very frightening household, which was filled with mental illness because my mother was really struggled her whole life with mental illness and was clinically depressed and had anxiety, and the music and the opera house and my dad and having music in the house and growing up and hearing that was a lifeline that has been the lifeline for the rest of my life.
And they discovered at a very young age that you were incredibly talented and they at playing the piano.
Mm-hmm. I think at 4 years old, I don't think it was, it became the way that I expressed myself because, and I'm sure with some Welsh people here, we would agree with me, you understand, but Brits anyway, weren't encouraged to talk about our feelings, weren't encouraged to talk about this big, invisible thing in our lives, that, the 900-pound gorilla in the corner, that was my mother's illness. So even, so it became so necessary to have somewhere to express myself. So at 4 years old, I began to copy what my sister was doing at the piano. And she was an incredible musician and older than me and playing Debussy and Chopin and everything. And I was able to hear it all and then do my versions of it, do my little simplistic versions of it, which was the beginning of it all. And my parents, of course, thought I was going to be an incredible concert pianist. And then we're hit very, very early on with the terrible information that I was unable to read or write music. I still can't to this day because I am musical dyslexic as I am word dyslexic as well. Okay. So, but that was okay because I was left on my own. I was left to my own devices, and everything I cared about was me and this piano where I'm sitting right now. Just, that's the relationship. And there are things, and I'm sure that's what I know is what we're going to talk about today. But the things that connect you with your yourself, the things that give you the strength to get through and move through trauma is, that thing that keeps you going. And luckily for me, I came into that household with music.
Do you think you were conscious of that? As this little 4-year-old, I've got a 4-year-old son, and he has actually great emotional intelligence. And do you think, was that your escapism, or were you sort of looking at your sister and going, I want to be her? But could you pick up on your mum's illness and
Yes,
that's fear?
Yeah, I picked up on my mother's illness. We both did. My sister and I picked up. It wasn't even picking up. My mother was such a she struggled so much that she had postnatal depression. I had pneumonia at a week old. I was dying. She couldn't cope. And the reason I know that the music meant as much as it did and was more than just me wanting to play around the piano is because when I played at age 4, 5 and onwards, and I found a chord progression, or I found something that I created that came directly from inside me, it made me cry, and I would cry at the piano, and I went to the piano to cry. So I know, I know what it was. And yes, it is about being emotionally intelligent and very connected, but I knew it was a safe place to emote.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And then we'll come back to you in a second. I think Stefan, Stu, over to you even.
Stefan, there's some things I need to know. You were born in Civifica. Is that a good impression? I don't know if
yeah.
You were born in SA, mate, South Africa. You came over to the UK in your early teens. Are you able to tell me a little bit more about your upbringing in SA?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I was born pretty much in farm life as a kid. So it was the whole. If you can just imagine it, we lived on a farm. You had vast fields of just everything pretty much growing there. And we had the freedom to reign and go or roam wherever we wanted to. So there was never really any restrictions. So we'd come back from school, and we would do our homework, have something to eat, and then off we'd go, get on the bikes, and then basically until bedtime. So, and there was a river there's mountains, there was, all sorts of animals, it was absolutely brilliant, a farmer's market. So as a kid, I couldn't really ask for anything more than that. And I suppose what it kind of sparked in me was this absolute love for like nature and being outdoors, but also like that physical, being hands-on, because obviously farm life isn't ever really easy, is it? Even as a kid, we were having to go and help put fences up at the back of the mountain, or go and chase some cattle that's managed to get out somewhere, or so always having to like muck in and help out. But it was kind of idyllic in a way, and sadly that kind of came to an end when I was about 8, and my parents decided that they're going to have a divorce. I then ended up moving to the city with my mother, and my father stayed on there. Did you get
in with the naughty crowd, I hear? At like the age of 8 or something?
Yeah, kind of I did. Yeah, so the city was... so being on a farm, you're kind of cut off. That rural community, you don't really know what's happening in the world outside of that, So moving to the city, I was exposed to things that I never even knew existed. And got in with the wrong crowd. But, that has also taught me a lot of things, a sense of adventure. We did get up to a lot of no good. We had we got chased by the police a few times, and we did cause a lot of damage to things, and it was.
He says with a smile on his face.
Yeah, everyone. Well, I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunate that I already know you, but there's tell us some more. Sometimes you spoke about boarding school and stuff like that. Not everyone's got that sort of that background, and it's very interesting to me.
So certainly interesting. So from the city, my mum obviously in the meantime married an Englishman, and he had a property in a place called Nelspruit, which is near the Kruger National Park, and it's a fascinating place, beautiful. But anyway, went there, and it was over 3 hours drive away from the city. So we had to go to a hostel boarding school, going to high school, first year of high school, you go through an initiation. It was seen as the norm back in those days. And it was, picture this, you've got I suppose the grade 12s, they are 17, nearly 18, in charge of 12-year-olds and the initiation and the things that they kind of put us through. So in the school in itself, in the daytime, we would it's just being made fun out of, being embarrassed, kind of that whole mentality of breaking people down and then building them back up. But being in boarding school, that didn't finish. That carried on into the evening. So for the first sort of 3 months, it was, I suppose another way to describe it, is abusive in a way. But yeah, the discipline was there. To have your room inspections and all your kit had to be a certain way. It's very military. And if anybody messes up, you'll be in for a rude awakening the following morning, being woken up at 3:00, taken out with all your books in a bag. You have to stand with your arms stretched out to the side and hold it, and you'd be shaking, and they'd be running up and down and hill. And to be fair, I did go there slightly overweight, but after the 3 months, I certainly lost all of that. And I was quite fit as well.
So something good came out of it.
Yeah, so something good did come out of it, but it was it was shocking.
That sounds like the military, breaking you down to build you back up again, and this initiations and the discipline. How did it seem that it was just a natural step for you to leave school and then end up joining, the British Army? I mean, you're in the wrong country for starters.
Yes. Yeah. So the whole journey between sort of South Africa and joining up was actually was a few years. I mean, I didn't join until I was 21. But I suppose from a discipline point of view, I suppose I rebelled after that. The hostel kind of got to me, the humiliation, all the kind of that abusiveness, and having to wear a plastic bag on your head with an aspirin on your forehead, having to fan somebody because he's hot, and having syrup put on your face and then wiped in dry grass, that kind of stuff. It was all, and then obviously the strictness. When we moved to England, I kind of rebelled against all of that kind of stuff. So for me, the thought of joining the military at the time was not it was not on the forefront of my head. It wasn't a natural step because I've kind of had enough of all that discipline. And, and I went through a rebellious phase. I really gave my mum a hard time. Yeah, but it wasn't until I went to college, and that didn't really sit right with me because I just didn't cope very well with being that adventurous spirit inside me. Didn't really do very well with being cooped up in a concrete box,
studying computer programming, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it was just completely. But again, that was following my brother's footsteps because that's what he did, and I felt very much that I needed to do what he's doing in order to kind of be someone and to kind of, I didn't really have an identity, I don't think, at that age. I kind of just did what he wanted to do. He was still in South Africa, but I was kind of doing here what he was doing there, thinking that that's the way forward. But then, I just one day just felt, do you know what? I kind of want to do something where I get to travel the world. I want to help people. I want to keep fit. I lacked stability. So I wanted something that gives me that stability, and almost a family. When I was 15, we moved around quite a lot when I was a child. So I'm constantly used to saying goodbye to people, meeting new people and saying goodbye to them all over. I think the longest we lived in a place was probably 2, maybe 3 years. And so I wanted somewhere where I can belong and not have to worry about leaving it again. It just seemed natural for this adventurous, sort of thrill-seeking young man that wanted to do all these things to join the military.
And so your military career began.
It did indeed, yeah.
And we'll pick it up again in a bit, if that's okay. And Judith, I just wanted to come to you. You've spoken about music, and just clearly this was just always going to happen. Music is just part of who you are and your spirit. But how has it been? What has music meant to you for your life? Because it seems like it's had so many roles in your life as a therapy, but also as a career. How do you make sense of that, and what does it mean to you?
I do it because, honestly, I was a lonely, frightened child. And without my sister, and just like your brother, I would not have been able to make it through any of this. And she still is my hero, and we're still unbelievably close and talk to each other every day. And she works with me on my Facebook shows and everything like that. She's incredible. But ultimately, I was a scared, lonely child. And what I wanted was what we couldn't have growing up. You know, we never have friends over. We couldn't bring people over. God forbid anybody saw what was going on. You know, it wasn't possible. I never had friends over. I mean, I think maybe once we had one person over, and it was nerve-wrackingly awful because we were just walking on eggshells all the time to try and make things not implode.
Because your mum
couldn't cope.
Okay.
Yeah, either that, you know, it was just, I only realized when I went to other people's houses and other people's homes and children's parties, I suddenly realized how family life was for other people. My sister was my guest at my birthday and I was her guest at her birthday party. I mean, seriously, this is how it was. So as a scared and lonely child, who every time I heard music, when I was in the opera, when I heard music playing, I would cry with release. It made me feel connected. It made me feel like there was somewhere I belonged. So music to me, my writing of music, my recording of music, my performing is the most important part in my world, in my whole life. It's been about connecting with other human beings and being able to say things and write songs and sing about the things that we all go through, the things we all struggle with, the things that we all are trying to balance and don't understand and are scared of, and it frightens us. Life is wonderful and awful. That's how it is. Music for me is been the way that I found to connect me to other human beings, to be able to have that feeling of sharing and community. And I never had that as a child. People say to me, what do you think your job is? What is your job as a musician? And I can say quite clearly and categorically that my job is to give the listener and my audience permission to feel the biggest, hardest emotions and to feel safe because I'm letting them, it's in a safe environment where I'm kind of doing it for them and we're all in it for the same ride. We're all in this together. Nobody's lonely, feeling it on their own, suffering in silence. I'm the one that's saying it first. I lead with my experiences. And laughter and crying are the two most important feelings in the world. And sometimes we laugh when we should cry because things are so appalling. Funnily enough, with the gentleman here, you lovely men, one of the funniest men I've ever met in my life was a war correspondent. And he told me, and I met him at the BBC, and he was telling me about how, you know, the laughs. I mean, after these atrocities, after things going on, the absolute dire need for laughter, because otherwise you would expire.
Yeah.
And I believe in that deeply. I really do.
I'm definitely there with that. Sometimes if I'm having a bad day or whatever, I'll sometimes just chuck Netflix on and just watch a silly comedy or something like that.
Yeah, I agree, Stuart. It's just like, I mean, I cannot thank Laurel and Hardy and all my favorite, you know, I mean, ridiculously simple tools in order, you know, last time I went to Africa on safari, one of the greatest things, speaking of South Africa, unbelievable. Changed my life again, hanging out with elephants, just the greatest. But I was listening to Alan Partridge the whole time because I was on a bit of a downer, and I was listening to Alan Partridge because that was what was getting me through. And it's like, yeah.
Thank you for that, Judith. And I think I mentioned before about that ripple effect with your music, and you don't know what those ripples and that impact's going to be. And I think with our Making Generation R campaign, and you know, it's gone out to all of these people, and Stefan in particular, like your story, you going out and being vulnerable and sharing your amazing story, which we're just going to ask you about now, has I know had wonderful impact and positive impact on young people and first responders who've heard it.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Alice. It is a fantastic story, and you joined the light infantry, and I just want to say, you know, to you, Stefan, that nobody holds that against you. Not everyone can be in the best regiments within the army. That someone has to go in these lesser regiments. It's okay. No one holds that against you. You didn't make the grade. It's fine.
It took you this long to say something. I was waiting for that.
Yeah. So light infantry. good bunch of guys. I think you're at the rank of Lance Corporal when you went on your first tour of Afghanistan, I think.
No, I was a private. So I basically literally finished basic training, had 2 weeks off, and then I was on the plane out to Afghanistan in end of 2006. So so that was my first eye opener to the real world, really, rather than the one that we get depicted on TV. And it was so that was. And during that tour, we actually then merged with others and became the Rifles. So it was.
So the first tour was a big eye opener then.
Yeah, really big, and it was. It's one of those where we went to Sangin, Sangin DC at the time, and we took over from the parachute regiment, and basically surrounded. There was nothing else there. It was just, I think, the closest base to us was about six kilometers to the south, and you had a wadi to the west, and then basically everywhere else is just, there was nothing, and you had the bazaar just up, so. And there's that kind of, in a way, we were isolated and we were cut off, and they couldn't get supplies to us for a period of time. They couldn't, running out of water, food, ammunition, it's that kind of thing. We had to dig trenches in order to kind of like get a bit of cover, because the Taliban were trying to dig under the HESCO walls that we had kind of protecting us, and they were nearly getting through, and it was like sitting duck was definitely the
my first tour was actually not too bad. I was in a place, Lashkargah, but everyone listening, Sangin, which I did my second tour in. Sangin is like the Taliban's last stronghold. It's famously named, bandit country. It's a very, very rough place to be. So to go out there at such a young age and smash out your first tour there, digging in trenches and waiting on rations to be dropped off and whatnot, that's proper hardcore, mate. So hat off to you.
I mean, to me, that sounds absolutely terrifying to be there. I mean, anyway, but the fact that you don't have the right resources, what was that like? Did you thrive on it, or did you just think, what am I doing here?
I think for me, so I'm a bit weird in this respect. I enjoy hardship, and it sounds a bit strange, but I think maybe it's to do with my childhood. I'm still obviously exploring that, but when I joined the army, and they were kind of busy telling us about what it would be like out on a tour, and the more they were kind of mentioning about, you're going to be hungry, you're going to be cold, you're going to be wet, the more I'm like, yeah, I can do this. The more I was kind of like buzzing off it. And I suppose at the time it was quite nerve-wracking, because you're thinking, right, well, it's not really, if they have a massive assault now, they don't know what state we were in with to do with like kit, equipment, resources, but if they could have overrun us easily. They had enough people there. They had, and there's only so much we could have done with what we had. And I suppose it was quite shocking in a way. But then at the time, I felt invincible. I've got sort of a strong faith in me. I had a strong kind of, but I kind of enjoyed that in a way. And it was. It wasn't until afterwards that I thought, oh, maybe I should have taken up life insurance, which I didn't, because I didn't think that anything was going to happen to me. I was just so adamant that we'll be fine.
But it didn't on the first tour, did it?
Well, yeah, we did really well on that first tour, and everybody was fine, luckily. And we've had a few close shaves where I didn't know how people survived, but they did. We managed to kind of get away from there. And I think... it was humbling in a way, but I suppose that's where I felt like a true connection with, I mean, to me, it was, I suppose, the creator, almost you can definitely feel there's something that was kind of looking after you, because you're so vulnerable, you're so exposed. There's not really, you're literally in the jaws of the crocodile, and it's just waiting to collapse on you, but for some reason it just doesn't, and you just think, wow, I'm so small in the great scheme of things, and yet I've managed to get through this, and it was all right, and everybody else did, and it was just surreal. It was surreal.
How many tours did you end up doing in Afghanistan?
Two. Well, I was injured on my second tour.
So was there a bit of were you going back to Sangin? What happened at your second tour, would you mind me asking?
So the second tour was 2009. So that was back in Sangin again, but this time a different. So we took over the same area, but my company went to Fob Nole, which was different to the one we were in last time, but it wasn't that far away from it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Were you
but it
involved
was
in
still.
Operation Panther's Claw in 2009 and stuff like that? Or
We got there just at the tail end of that.
okay.
So 2 rifles were involved in that, and then we kind of took over from them.
Yeah.
That sounds like something you probably don't want to be involved in.
No, it was hairy.
Lucky on that in 2009. Sort of, we lost our commanding officer and stuff like that. It had a huge sort of morale effect. You know, the man that's in charge of the whole battalion. Yeah. So yeah, that was a bit of a rough one. We lost about 5 guys in 5 days. It's a horrible time to be there.
It was a nightmare of a time for you guys, wasn't it?
2009, I think, on record, is the worst year in Afghanistan military history.
Wow,
So you came out towards the end of Panther's Claw. You know, how were your feelings going back for the second time? Mine were very sort of, the first tour was very kinetic. The Taliban seemed to get on board with that, so they started IEDs all over the place.
Yeah.
So what was your what was it like for you going back a second time?
It was a bit more nerve-wracking, and obviously this time I definitely had make sure I had life insurance. But I think before we went out there, things started to change. So when the guys out on Panther's Claw, like you guys, that's kind of when the whole scheme of warfare changed. Before then, you could pretty much go anywhere, and you didn't really have to worry about stepping on IEDs. You know, the Taliban were still the Taliban that we knew about, you know, and before, and then obviously during that tour, they had some foreign influences, and things definitely changed. We obviously got all of the reports, and Fob Nole was sort of dubbed Fob No Legs because the amount of ID strikes in and around the area, and it was.
And a FOB is a forward operating base.
Forward operating base, yeah, that's right. And it was. But this is a funny thing about humour again. We sort of laughed at it. Yeah. We laughed at it, thinking, you know, but there was still, it was in the back of your mind. But for me, it was. So I almost had 2 agendas in a way. I lost my best friend earlier in the year. He was killed in Afghanistan, and you know, that was Tom, and that was, you know, my heart was ripped out of my chest when I had a phone call from his brother to say, you know, well, Tom's dead, and he was literally just about to come home as well.
And this is Tom who got you to join up to the military, wasn't it? And you sort of followed his lead.
Yeah, you know, and it was, like I said, he was my closest friend, and it was and there's so much that I learned from Tom even before joining the military, but it was so that was still fresh in memory, and you know, we had quite a lot going on that year. I managed to get married just before going out on the tour as well, so we got married in May, and then that September went out, and it was so all of these things were kind of in the back of my mind. So definitely nerves, a lot more nervous, I would say, but at the same time feeling that I wanted to go back out there to definitely make a difference, but also to maybe just get my own back a little bit for Tom, if that makes sense. Not that revenge is on your head. It's not, I didn't see it as revenge, but I just see it as, you know, we've got to stop these guys. Somebody has to go out there and somebody has to put a stop to them. But it's not just Tom, it's the locals as well. I mean, the Taliban rule through fear, intimidation, violence. That's what they do. I mean, they used to, so anything Western they didn't stand for at all. So doctors, schools, you know, clothing, music, all of that stuff was completely banned under their rule. And if anybody was kind of found to be in breach of their rules, they'd be made an example of. And whether that might be killing them in public in front of everybody, it might be, you know, like kids were having acid thrown in their faces for going to school. You know, and you think, so it wasn't just our guys, it was, you're doing it for them as well, because who else have they got? You know, the Afghan government didn't have, you know, their army is not strong enough to deal with the Taliban. So, you know, we are kind of like the only hope that the locals really had. So you kind of, so there's definitely more than one reason, you know, to go out there, to kind of go, right, I'm nervous, but if we don't go out there, if I don't go out there, then who's going to do it?
It wasn't about you.
Yeah.
No, it's definitely, there's so much more involved than just me.
And so tell us about what happened.
So, It wasn't actually that. We were about a month into the tour. We literally just, the Fusiliers handed over to us. So we've just finished all the familiarization stuff, and we were just doing our first kind of patrols, venturing a bit further out. ID threat was through the roof. There was within a sort of a mile radius around the forward operating base, it was just riddled. It almost looked like the Milky Way. You know, we had a map that sort of showed all the where all the IDs have been found up until that time, and like I said, it looks like the Milky Way was surrounding the forward operating base. So the aim was to kind of get beyond that, where we have a bit more free reign and we can kind of take the Taliban on in their area, you know, and have a bit more freedom of movement and stuff, and be a bit more effective, because up until you get to the edge of that, you're doing very slow patrolling, having to use these detectors to try and find IEDs. So it was extremely slow and laborious in a way. And we've done a couple of patrols already that day. I was the second in command of a multiple of which is made up of 12 soldiers. There's 2 multiples going out. And normally I'll be in the assaulting multiple, so they're kind of like the ones at the front going through each objective, sort of physically doing the stuff. And then
so are you at most at risk of finding an IED?
Generally speaking, yes. Although the other multiple will be moving on the flanks, so the risk is kind of equal, really. Okay. But I suppose with the assaulting group pushing out further, you have a bit more risk. But obviously, generally, the Taliban would be they get taken on first by the Taliban. But this particular patrol was then put into the Overwatch, which was different to me. I've not done that yet on that tour. So I already had nerves kicking in, thinking, right, well, now I'm second in command of Overwatch. So like, what does that entail? It's almost like a bit of a different, I knew my job and I knew to trust my training, but because it was a change, I suppose it's a change to the norm, which just threw me a little bit. I didn't expect that at that time. And we got to an area, like a bit of high ground. It's a small little hill. The assaulting multiple were down in the valley just below us, going through a few compounds. And we had to hold our position on this hilltop. I placed everybody out in what we call an all-round defence, which is everybody goes in like a 360, like a circle. Everybody faces outwards, so we have complete coverage of the area around us. And then Luke and George were our 2 detector men. And they were out in front, and they were clearing the inside of this all-round defence while I was busy briefing all the guys up around the outside.
Clearing it for IEDs?
Yeah, so we're just scanning it.
Yeah.
And, they've gone over it a couple of times at least. And anyway, I chatted to the Gravat, was the last chap I placed in his position, just had a chat with him, make sure he's all right with everything, showed him like what's what, just kind of bringing him up to speed of what's going on. I looked at Luke and George, asked them if they're happy that it's all clear. They said, yep, happy with that. And it's funny because for a split second, something inside me just kind of said, well, hang on, just walk around the outside where all the men are positioned. Don't walk through the middle of this all-round defence.
Oh, gosh.
But then part of me is thinking, right, well, there's a lack of trust in kit and equipment as it is. If I, as a leader, don't sort of show people that you can trust the kit and equipment, then the tour's not going to go very well. And it's one of those things that's quite ironic, really. I decided to go against my gut. I went through the middle and just stepped on it with my left foot. Went up in a cloud of smoke, thunder, it's like the sound of lightning going off, and I couldn't see a thing, couldn't hear a thing for a split second. It's just dust, smoke, the smell of burning in the air, that kind of stuff. And for a split second, I didn't realise it was me that set the ID off. I thought it was somebody else. And I had this kind of funny feeling going through my body, and in particular my left leg. And I looked down, and obviously I was just confronted with, what was left of it, and it was completely gone above the knee. And, it was a horrific sight. And as at that point, I've just gone, oh, well, it's me that's just been blown up. So, but it's funny because at the same time, it's that kind of, don't panic, don't scream, don't kick off, don't get angry. You need your energy now. You need to now go into conservation mode. Check the rest of your body, make sure everything else is all right. which it wasn't. But, luckily I still had my hands. I managed to kind of get my helmet and everything else off. And, obviously blood was pouring out everywhere. And by this point, the guys managed to get to me, started kind of addressing my wounds to stop the blood from flowing. And it's at that point where, I could just feel like that sort of my life just kind of fading away from me. It's just kind of like draining into the earth as such. And for a split second, I didn't really think about like it sounds a bit horrible, but the first thing I thought of was, there goes my career. I had so much ambition in what I was going to do and where I was going to do. But not only that, the military definitely became my family. It was my stability. It gave me everything that I didn't really feel that I had before joining the military. So, it's that utter devastation of that. But then it was not, as I was draining, I was thinking, well, hang on, I can't be another statistic. Tom died out here. I'm not going to die out here. I've got my wife at home. I've got friends, family. And then that kind of survival instinct kicked in. And yeah, to a point of complete desperation where, I really was fading fast and I had nothing left in me, and I just sort of even like prayed, just give me some strength to get through this. And yeah, so I managed to hold on to get off the ground.
And how did you get from there in in Afghanistan back to the UK? I mean, they must have had to move pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean they did. The blokes are absolutely brilliant. I mean, you could see all that training paid off. I was at back at the forward operating base well before the helicopter even got to us. They've got like the golden hour, and I managed to get there in the field hospital. What does that mean,
the golden hour?
So the golden hour. So they basically say you've got an hour to try and get somebody on like that advanced medical treatment. If you can get seen within that golden hour, it dramatically increases your chance of survival. So yeah, the guys got me to the forward operating base really quickly. I had obviously more tourniquets applied. I had some pain relief, all that kind of stuff. But the thing is with all of that, the battle then became like harder and harder and harder. I just really constantly just wanted to fade away. And it was funny, we were next to the helicopter landing zone in the forward operating base, and by that point I was just about thinking, right, well, I can't really hang on anymore. And just in the distance, I just heard the helicopter coming in, and I could hear the guy saying, it's on its way, just hang on a bit more. And you just feel that hope. And it's funny what that feeling does, just kind of completely lifts you a little bit. And I just managed to hang on and got onto the back of the helicopter. And then by that point, I said, right, I can't do it anymore. And that imminent kind of feeling of death came over me. So right, well, this is it. This is the moment that I'm going, and I thought, no, don't give up, tell the medic. So over the noise, I somehow managed to get enough strength to get the medic's attention. And she looked at me asking me, what's wrong? And I just said, I'm falling, I'm going, I can't stay awake. And she just kind of said, obviously she had to shout at me, but in my head, it just sounds like so soft, don't worry, we've got you. And as soon as she said that, I was just gone. I just went.
Wow.
But again, talking about the humour earlier again. So as I was being extracted off the ground, I remember the guy who was on the top cover. So I had this it's like an armoured Land Rover, basically, open top with guns on it and stuff that came to pick me up. It's called a Jackal. And the guy on the gun, he's just telling me, you'll be all right, you'll be all right. And I just sort of joked with him and said, well, this is one way to get to go home early, isn't it? And, just little things like that. And then in the forward operating base, my Sergeant Major came to see me and, and obviously said, what do things look like down there? And he said, I wouldn't worry about that. It was tiny anyway, So just little things like that. We just had a few chuckles. So, and that definitely helped at the time.
And they had got you, and you got taken over to Birmingham Hospital. Is that the QE Hospital, Queen Elizabeth Hospital, and you arrived there? Am I right? I said it in your biography, with swine flu.
Yeah.
And what else do you have? And pneumonia. So you've lost both your legs. You've lost bits of your finger. You've been blown up. Yeah. You've got swine flu. You've got pneumonia. Yeah, I know. It's it was crazy. So
I don't know where I would have contracted it. I must have contracted pneumonia at the point of injury, I'm sure. But yeah, severe pneumonia and swine flu. It was celioak actually I went to first. But woke up in intensive care, and Sadie, my wife, was standing there. And it's quite funny because the first thing, again, she took the mick out of me because when I opened my eyes, like one eye was looking that way and the other eye was looking the opposite way. And she sort of chuckled, but so she took the mick out of me. This first thing, I still get grilla for that this day. But
you went on to have one of the most amazing recoveries, and just sort of picking up on a point that Judith said there earlier about being a victim. You clearly had chosen that you were not going to be a victim of this incident, and something within you just kicked in, and you were within 3.5 weeks of being injured, being blown up, you were standing on inflatable legs.
Right. That's right. And I think it's a combination of things. I think that I did go through a period of feeling like a victim. You're sort of I'm more focused on the things that I've lost, and that kind of stuff. But there was a turning point where it's like that acceptance. It's like, well, this is not going to go away overnight. It's not going to change. I can't get out of here. It is what it is. People are counting on me. I've worked hard to get to where I am now, to stay awake, to stay alive. All the nurses and doctors, everybody's worked really hard to keep me awake. It'd be such a waste to just kind of give up. So, and that's where changing the mentality from, it's taking responsibility. I think it's like, I always see that as like the opposite to being a victim. You take responsibility. And it's funny, I recently heard a quote where basically said that if you by taking responsibility, you count yourself as part of the solution. But if you don't take responsibility, you count yourself out of being part of the solution. You almost just sat there waiting for something to change, whatever, but that's never going to happen. But the support team, that was probably one of the biggest things. It's all good and well that I've got that drive, but I was all wrapped up, I was pretty useless at the time. But Sadie was there, the medical team. The surgeon told us that Stefan needs to eat 8,000 calories a day because his body needs energy to heal. And Sadie made sure I was eating 8,000 calories. She was belt feeding me food. I had 3-course meals a day, to a point where it just became so autonomous that she's just shoving it into my face and I couldn't keep up, and that really helped too. And it's just that reason to kind of keep fighting was there, and just to push on and push on and push on. And that, combined with the support that I had, meant that I managed to recover really quickly. 3.5 weeks later, I was on this plinth, and they strapped these weird contraptions to me, and it lifted slowly, and there I was. I was standing again. Obviously holding on to a frame, but
another incredible human. And
I
can see, Judith, you were nodding there, and when Stefan was speaking about acceptance, and we know Stefan has been through a very physical trauma, and you've had a very different type of trauma. But do you see synergy? Yeah.
That's just a remarkable story, Stefan. But you're a remarkable person. That's clear.
Thank you.
That's clear. And it's watching you and hearing everything. It's like, to me, it's so clear that everything that you grew up with, everything you were as a kid, everything you went through made you the person that was perfect for what you went into. It's like, it's extraordinary. But that's, of course, what life is. It's like, it's making us, it is almost molding us into the very thing, good, bad, indifferent, that we go through. Exactly. And it is incredible. But then also, fortunately, because of everything that you knew and the person that you were, and the person you were up here as well as inside, to have the knowledge, I believe, that if you're not part, you can either wallow in what was. And I did that for a long time. I did the wallowing in what was and how I wish it had been and how it should have been. And if that loop, the loop that the sick brain goes into. It's like literally it's like the grooves in a record. It just gets stuck. The needle gets stuck and it keeps going round. Or, like you did, which is extraordinary, you can say, no, this is how it is. This is who I am, what it is, how it is from this day forth. And no matter what I think and what I wallow in, it's never going to be that ever again. So either I'm on board and I'm part of this, and that's really very, very wise, I think, because for me, like I said, realizing the big realization came with when I faced up to the fact that this was who I was. This is an illness that I really do have. And this is the person that I came in as, and I have many wonderful traits, but I'm also very flawed, and I have this illness. And so from that point forward, it was very clear to me that, and that's the difference again between being a victim and feeling like somehow the world owes you and that it should make you better and somebody should come along and save you. That's not it. It's not how it works.
And was that moment when you were diagnosed?
Because I was from a particularly Welsh, I'm serious, you don't air your dirty laundry mentality, very old school, that kind of thing about, no, you don't share that, you keep it, that's private, you keep that to yourself. Because I came from that background, there was no thought that you would ever talk to other people about it. And then it's suicide, so it's shameful, and it's so much stigma, and it's so much utter grief and shame. You'd never want to share that with anybody. And then I've got it, so it's even more shameful and appalling. But you can't see it on a scan, and you can't, So when I went to America, and now I'm in my mid-20s, for God's sake, I go to America, and finally, you'll love this one, I find myself a psychiatrist. So I was really driven. I was still driven. I knew that I needed to take care of this. That was the backbone right there. That was I want to live. But I spent the first year lying to the psychiatrist because I didn't want him to hate me. Do you love that? It's just one of my finest moments, I would say. And it makes me laugh to this day. Oh yeah. I didn't want him to see the real me and hate me. I wanted him to love me because that's, I'm the good child. I'm the good daughter. I'm the good child. And I want everybody to love me and not see the interior horror. And so finally, when I came clean and showed and actually revealed who I really was, he was dumbstruck. He could not believe anybody.
He didn't pick up on it.
He didn't pick up on it. And he was a truly amazing psychiatrist. But that's how good I was. It's how fine an actress I was, and that's how good I was at wearing my armor. But when he actually diagnosed what I had and said, you have clinical depression and a very a chronic anxiety disorder, and you've also got PTSD from what you saw your mother going through and what you grew up with and everything. I mean, when he laid it out like this, I had something tangible it was literally like having a hook on the wall that you could put your hat on. I could actually go, there it is, there it is. You can't see it, you can't touch it, you can't, but I had it. I had the reason why I had been so, and I had this since I was a child. It wasn't just watching my mother. I had it myself since I was a kid. So it was two people under the same roof going through this. I mean, I knew what was going on. So from that point, that to me was a turning point. That was absolutely the fork in the road. That, like Stefan's talking about, is when you realize this is it. This is how it is. It's who I am. It still took me a long time to really take it in and get out from years and years and years of the self-loathing and the looking back and if only. But ultimately, it was the greatest release I've ever felt in my life.
I bet.
The greatest.
Yeah, finally there was a reason for this, and it was a proper reason. It was written in a book, and it was real in some way.
Well, you know that line that we said a lot in Losing It was like, it's all in your mind. Well, it is. Yeah. It is all in your mind, but that doesn't make it any less real.
It's great to hear that therapy is a big interesting to hear the way you were talking about how fibbing to your therapist a little bit and whatnot. That's really interesting.
You did therapy, didn't you, Stu?
Yeah, so I found myself in a mental health unit for about 3 months, and I often joke about, references One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and stuff like that, but it's absolutely it's as far away from that as you can think of. I was very, very well looked after. Got some funny stories from some people I met in there who were very interesting, but I think sometimes they're lying to themselves. But I could go on about that for a long time.
Because you were sort of ill, and
I was just running on fumes. I was just inside. I was just screaming, and but at the same time having to smile to everyone, and I was, and then to the point where I just felt so useless, and I just didn't want to be here anymore. So luckily, I got into that mental health unit before all that happened, to the point where I had like therapy every day, which was fantastic. And then that's a good few years ago now. To where now I have it, every other week, and it's literally just to keep on top of it and to keep the demons at bay, if you like. But something I'd love to ask is, Stefan, is there anything you've ever bothered with, or would you bother with? I don't know.
What, as in like from a treatment point of view, like mental health treatment? No. I mean, it wasn't all plain sailing for me. So after, it's funny because I think it's distraction. I've been distracted throughout the military and stuff, so things get put to the back of your head and you just move on. And obviously once I got to Headley Court, you're in a clinical environment, everybody's in a similar boat, you all share stories, it's a good coping mechanism. But it's something I said to somebody recently, is that the thing with coping mechanisms is it just buys you time. It doesn't deal with the issue at hand. And it's almost like, and it's funny, something that Judith said there just made me think. It's like your head is, your brain is so powerful. It can achieve pretty much anything. And it's when the fog's kind of in the way, you can't even see the mountain that you have to climb. And if somebody comes along and just takes that away and clear the fog, you can then go, right, that's what I need to conquer. Yeah. And I kind of went through that. So as I started going home a bit more, reality started kicking in, being ambitious, being driven, had all these things I wanted to do. And slowly but surely I was realizing the situation I was actually in, the impact of the change that I've gone through and I'm going through is becoming the reality. So, there's so many things I couldn't do. And it started wearing away from me, but a bit like what Stu touched on there, it's almost like there was this pressure. So at Headley Court, you can be open about it. You can share stories, although nobody really said truly how they felt. They just talk about, stuff, which is, a coping mechanism.
And
talking is a good coping mechanism.
Just for those who don't know, is the military rehab centre.
Yeah, that's right. And that's, it was in Surrey. I think it's moved now to an even bigger facility, but that's from Selly Oak. I went to Headley Court, which is the Defence Rehabilitation Centre. State-of-the-art facility, absolutely brilliant. And that's the thing. Because you had everybody there on site, you don't actually realise how vulnerable you are until, I didn't realise until I went home. And then at home, I didn't have the experts there. I didn't have that support. I had people who didn't know how to deal with me. I had people that didn't quite know what to say, what to do. I didn't really know what to say or do. But because I went through hospital so quickly and started my recovery so well, there was this pressure that, Stefan's all right. He's doing really well. Yeah. How are you? Are you doing well? Yeah. And it's a bit like what Judith said there. You can't really reveal yourself to people because you feel that you're going to let them down. Uh-huh. And you end up then selling yourself a lie where you go, but the more I lied to myself, the more I kind of started slipping down that slope. And then it kind of got to a point where I started pushing people away. That feeling of guilt that I can't be the person that I was before, that expectation was too much to have to be a certain way, but I knew that I was broken. And I couldn't tell people this. And I didn't have the support at home. So I spent too long kind of going through in my own head, just focusing on, the victim. I did become a massive victim. And it got to a stage where my first child, Renee, was born. And so this would have been October, so just over a year after. Obviously, it was a surprise to us because I didn't realise that, anyway, that we'd be able to have kids so soon. But and it was a bit of a double-edged weapon, really, because there was the excitement of having Renee in our lives, and it's just brilliant. You spent 9 months just waiting to meet her and so on. But at the same time, it was that whole kind of, my brain was just taken over, and it was just going, yeah, but what about, you can't take her to the beach, you can't swim with her, you can't carry on your shoulders, you can't do this, you can't do that. And because I started getting quite depressed myself, it's kind of like, you're going to be a bad father because you're going to bring her up in a house where you're depressed, where you're like always in a mood, where you're like this, where you're like that, all these kind of thoughts. And I just started feeling worse and worse and worse, and just started pushing the very people that were there to support me away, because I couldn't really open up to them to tell them these things. So yeah, I've definitely experienced that, and I've definitely gone through it. And for me, it came to a point where, Sadie and I just had a massive argument, because for her, she's been through everything with me, and she's been by my side. She's never been judgmental. She's been so supportive, and I kind of just shut her out. So she didn't know what's going on. And then all of a sudden, I just became depressed. I just became angry, all these sorts of things. And she said, well, what's going on? I can't help you or deal with you if you don't tell me what's going on. Anyway, and it got to a stage where Sadie's like, she must have known me extremely well. And obviously she does, because I think the thing she did next was very risky in a way, because she turned around and she gave me the ultimatum. She said, because I was low, but like what Stu said there, you sort of feel useless to everybody, and you feel actually people will be better off without me. And once you convince yourself of that, it's almost like no matter what people say, you always find a reason to kind of contradict what they've just told you into why people will be worse off without you. If that makes sense. Sadie just went, no, do you know what? If you don't go and see somebody and get some help, then I'm walking. I've been through everything. You're pushing me away. I can't handle this anymore, because she also had her own mental health to think of as well. Everybody's got things from the past. And I think what happened with me was the realization that it wasn't just the fact that I've been blown up, that I lost my career, but it's everything from my childhood that I never really dealt with, that I never really understood, that was all hidden below. And, when I wore my beret, all of that was kind of like kept at bay. And now all of a sudden this is all coming out all in one go. And it was, she gave me the ultimatum, but funnily enough, I went to the therapist, and I was just sat there and talking about weather, football, thinking like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to bluff my way through this. Yeah, I'm going to bluff my way through this, because I don't need his help. And also, if I just go through the motions, at least Sadie won't leave. So, and it's like, but he was very, I can't even remember what it was, but there just come a time where it was just like a couple of questions, and it just really got in there. Yeah. And it just completely, and that's it. And since then I just opened up, and it was, and I still see somebody now, on and off. And it was, but yeah, that just really opened up. That cleared the mist for me. And it's like, this is what I've got to face. And then we systematically started climbing that mountain.
I always think that it's like, my husband stood by me and through the worst stuff. I don't know why he didn't run for the hills. I just don't even understand it, except I know it's because he loves me so much and he sees who I really am underneath all of this. But ultimately, he will never understand what it is that I have been through, feel, what's going on up in here. He will never really, because he doesn't have it, he doesn't feel it, he hasn't seen it. No one understands like a person who is either, there to deal with these things, or somebody that's gone through what you've gone through. No one. And it's why it's so, I feel for you guys. I know that you're in a situation where I guess you're not encouraged to talk about stuff, to share stuff, to be open, to be emotional. That's the last thing they want people to do in the army, correct?
Yeah, no, definitely. The army's very much like, right, let's just move on. It's all about the next objective. So get your casualty off the ground, on we go.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't have time to be wallowing in anything. You just got to get on with it and off you go. And that's it next. I get it. I mean, I really, really do. I feel for you. But it's like, the only true way, as you say, of getting through the mist, of clearing the fog, is to say it, is to verbalize this with someone who understands. It's the only way.
And having the courage to do it as well.
Oh my
God.
Yeah,
that was,
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. To have you both here. So thank you so much for sharing this. I feel like we could literally be here for about 4 hours. It's so
I'd like to carry on
wonderful.
talking with both Stefan and Stuart. I think it's remarkable. So many things. I mean, it's just...
It is. You both are
remarkable, the two of you, really.
Yes. We come to sort of now our last few questions. And I think you might have touched on this before. Just we've asked our guests in the past a lot about just a moment in time. And I think both of you mentioned this before, and they've called it a light bulb moment, a moment when it struck you that this is, I get it. I know my way forward. Vic Hope from our last series described it. She had fairy lights as opposed to one light bulb moment. So I was going to ask you both, what is your light bulb moment? Is there one?
The light bulb of being told what was wrong with me. What was wrong with me? And I also think that there was another therapist. I'm not a believer in sticking with the same therapist. I've had a few now, because I think that you need to constantly be moving forward in life, and you need to be getting better, not just on some kind of one level where you're just saying how I feel today, how I feel. But no, I've constantly looked for people who challenge me and have taught me or given me the tools to be able to deal with life. I think that's a really important thing. I love, I want to know how to deal with a situation. I don't want to, as we used to say in losing it, I don't want somebody to put a Band-Aid on a tumor. You know what I mean? That's not what this is about. I want to know how to do it myself. And those are the things that, cognitive therapy has become a big part of my life. That's what I think is a very important thing. I realize that music is to me is a form of mindfulness, and it's like meditation for me. It's about getting in that zone. And so I always encourage anybody to find that place where they feel that they can really zone out and connect with the person they are, or rather the person they want to be, or to be able to actually decompress and be a little bit kind to themselves. But one of the most important things, I think, is when I learned from a therapist along the way how to actually be kind to myself and forgive myself for what had been, what I'd done, what I was, who I am. And I think that's a very large part of it, ultimately. Is we can be kind and we can be empathic to anyone under the sun except ourselves.
Yeah,
I think that's a great part of being a healthy human being, and I think that was a light bulb. I get them all the time. You see, I just think by the time I'm like a little wizened old woman with a tiny little claw for a hand at the piano, I'll still be learning.
Yeah.
I'll still be learning how to be a good human being and how to be the person I came in as. So yeah, I hope they just keep coming.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
And Stefan, how about you?
Yeah. I think mine, I kind of had two really big ones. I think my first one came not long after I started my therapy. Once Sadie gave me the ultimatum, and it was actually just something like power team, I like to call them. So I had one at Headley Court. It was a good way to get through things. I didn't have one at home, and that's why I kind of ended up struggling. I left it too long, so it was like, yeah, get people around you, open up. Just it's almost like the pain from just finally speaking to somebody is less than the pain that you'd cause if you didn't, like the long-term outcome from that. So it's kind of just swallowing the pride. But then it was setting that up at home. So at least every time I went home from Headley Court, I had the same support network there. My therapist, Sadie understood what was going on and so on. And from there, we could start building and climbing this mountain. And then the other one was actually came just over 2 years ago, where we've gone through another bit of a patch, because obviously Sadie's got things, and life is so ever evolving and fluid, and it's like a river. And the other one was that there's no one way to fix something or to deal with something. There's so many different ways, and I think in a way I feel that my upbringing has kind of tried putting me into like a cardboard box. Like the expectation from society is that when you're having issues, you've got to deal with it in a certain way, and these things aren't allowed and those things aren't allowed. And it's actually through I've got a different therapist now, but it's through the therapist I'm with now that we realize, actually, do you know what, just try different things, even if it breaks tradition, even if other people think it's wrong. If it works, it works. Don't be scared to just give it a go, because for so long people try and do what everybody else sees as right, that they don't ever get to fix their issues, and then they end up just in a worse place than what they were. So it's like so that was another big one for me a couple of years ago. So yeah.
Wow, thank you both. I was going to say, if you could tell your younger self one thing, what would it be? But I feel like those last answers is kind of life lessons, not just for yourselves, but I'm going to take that as well. So just a massive thank you to you both. Thank you for being just so open, so generous and honest. It has been an absolute honour to listen to your stories. And I just, think you're both wonderful. So
thank you for inviting me. This has been a really very moving and entirely uplifting and cathartic experience. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And obviously it's great to see you again, Stuart and Alice and Judith. What a pleasure it was to meet you. And wow,
I feel very connected. I'm so moved by you, but really, it's an amazing life, amazing story, and it's just the healing. Yeah,
and I'll just echo with what Alice said. Thank you so much for both of you being here and sharing it. Sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes but I think there's definitely some stuff I've taken away from it, which is quite interesting. So that's really nice. So thank you both.
Next week, we talk to SAS Who Dares Wins and former bodyguard to Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, Billy Billingham, and veteran and Making Generation R speaker, Al Kroll. Also, don't forget, we are releasing a remastered episode from Series 1 every Thursday. This week, we hear from Michael Keynes and veteran Mark Ormrod. Thank you to my co-host Stuart Harris and everyone in our production team. This podcast was generously funded by Blesma, the Limbless Veterans Charity, delivered by the Drive Project, supported by Facebook, and presented by me, Alice Driver, creator of the Making Generation R campaign. Huge thanks go to Cy Harmer, whose idea lit the torch paper of this podcast, and to you for listening.
If you've been affected by any of the issues discussed, then please take a look at our webpage or show notes, where you'll be able to find more information on support services.
Should you like to listen to any of the veterans' incredible stories, then they are available as part of this podcast series on the Making Generation R website. The Resilience Sessions grew out of the Making Generation R campaign, a project that trains injured veterans from Blesma to tell their stories, so far to over 100,000 people, from the young and vulnerable to frontline services and first responders across the UK. To find out more about Making Generation R and to book a free talk or workshop if you're a school, just Google Making Generation R.
If you've enjoyed listening today, then please do subscribe. Give us a 5-star review and share it with your family and friends. You never know who it might help.